Okay, welcome to our mission moment. I'm Pastor Brad Schallenberg of Peace Lutheran Church, and I want to talk to you today about church and about culture. And so let me just share a little bit of a screen with you here, a picture. There you go. And that is something wrong with that picture, as you can see. The bridge is missing the river. Now, there's a perfectly good bridge beside the river, not over the river like normal bridges should be. It's kind of like someone had gone to all the trouble of building a bridge, but then forgot the main purpose of the bridge, which is to span a river. Now, who would build a bridge in the wrong place? This picture was shared all over the internet a number of years ago, and there is an explanation. This is the Chula Teca bridge in Honduras. It was a state-of-the-art bridge built by a Japanese company for the Honduras government. Now, when it was built, it did indeed span the river. However, in October 1998, Hurricane Mitch hit the Caribbean and stalled over Honduras as a tropical storm, dumping historic amounts of rain on the region. There were reports of over 6 feet of water. Now, Honduras is mountainous. All that water came crashing down into the Chula Teca River Valley with such force that it literally changed the course of the river. In a matter of days, a perfectly good, perfectly built, state-of-the-art bridge became obsolete. And frankly, years later, it looks pretty silly there, missing the river. But here's the point. The real problem isn't that someone built the wrong bridge in the wrong place. The problem is that the river moved. And this is a metaphor that has been used to explain what's happening with the church and the culture we live in. For years, we've been able to operate and build churches as important centers of our culture. When people established a new community, one of the first buildings constructed was a church. When a family moved into a new community, one of the first things they sought out was a church. That's how this congregation was started. Someone in a district office in Regina said, you know what? We need a church in Northeast Winnipeg. Build it, and they will come. And it worked. That was almost 50 years ago. Back then, churches were important. Churches were respected. Churches served their local communities. Back then, all the churches had to do was schedule a service on a Sunday, open the doors, do a little bit of advertising, and people would come. For years, the Canadian church was well built, well positioned, and doing an excellent job of meeting the spiritual needs of a largely Christian culture. We could say that the church was spanning the river, the culture of that time. However, within my lifetime and ministry, a cultural hurricane has been turning, leaving the landscape unrecognizable to Christians who came of age in the 60s and the 70s. The river moved. The culture has shifted away from the bridge of the church. We no longer rely on strategies of attracting people to services and programs as being the best means of introducing people to the gospel. People in our community are increasingly saying, oh, thanks, but no thank you, to our invitations to come to church. I want you to consider these stats. Surveys tell us that people who used to be members of churches have walked away. And in so doing, church communities, the percentage of people attending church services hovers around about 15%. The number of people who say they have no religious affiliation has hit an all-time high. Confidence in organized religion has hit an all-time low. Less than 10% of adults under 30 regularly participate in the life of a local congregation. Less than 10%. Young adults perceive the organized church to be unnecessary to their spiritual journey. I mean, this is heartbreaking for sure. As I walk by the wall of fame or shame, however you want to look at it, the confirmation classes of years past, I know the heartbreak that parents feel wondering, where did they go wrong? Why are my children not in church? And it is heartbreaking. So, how could this happen? How could a perfectly good placed church like ours, just a generation ago, so quickly become, or on the verge of becoming, obsolete to the culture in general and to our own children and grandchildren specifically? Well, the river moved. And for a long time, our church was well built, well situated, and doing an excellent job of meeting the spiritual needs of the families in our community. The strategies we had, the presumptions we held to, were right for the culture at that time. And some of you remember those days as glory days. However, the river moved. Looking at the picture of the bridge and the river, the obvious solution is not to try and get the river to move back to where it was, but to build the next span of bridge to where the river is now. And in the same way, our solution as a church is not to make the culture move back to where it was. That would be pretty hard. But focus our prayer and our planning on building the bridge over where the culture is now. And where is it now? Well, in a remarkably short period of time, Canada is moving further and further away from where it was. It's not even a post-church culture. It's a pre-church culture, because most people in our communities were not raised with church at all, have never ever been part of a church. And those people are living all around us. Do you know what that makes us then? If they're living all around us, it makes us missionaries. We are missionaries whether we realize it or not. We used to think of missionaries as people being sent to faraway places like China or Africa. But now we're missionaries in our own subdivisions and neighborhoods. We used to think of people being overseas missionaries, but now we can think of people being, well, neighborhood missionaries. We can send people home after church to do mission work. Why? Because our local neighborhoods have become mission fields. How cool is that? And the good news is that in a matter of decades, church people have become missionaries in their own communities. The bad news is that we were not raised, equipped, or trained to be missionaries. The good news is that Jesus knows this and he's made provisions for it. Consider this. Our culture has become uniquely ripe for harvest for the church again. What our culture is longing for is well within our sweet spot as Jesus followers to give. And this is what is really exciting. I want you to think about this. The culture may no longer be interested in our organized church stuff, not yet anyway, but without even knowing it, they are uniquely interested in a biblical Christianity. They're looking for what Jesus calls his followers to be. And I'll give you an example. Just notice how people take note of when someone sacrifices themselves for the good of others. Those stories are always in the news or on social media. What is agape love? It's Christian love, sacrificial love. We own that People appreciate also the opportunity to sort through their spiritual questions honestly without being manipulated. We can do that. People are intrigued by someone who exhibits strength and wisdom. Wow, we sit at the foot and learn from the humblest and wisest teacher who ever lived. And look at the list of the fruit of the Spirit, the fruit the Spirit gave us. Are these not what people are longing for today? Love and joy and peace and patience and gentleness and kindness and self-control. People love also a good redemptive story. Just think about the movies that are being made and how many redemptive stories are in those movies. They want to discover the truth. They long for a community with people they can trust. They wonder if an encounter with a loving God is even possible. And all these things we can give them because God has first given it to us. We can do this. This is who we are as followers of Jesus. Now, the bad news is that people in our culture no longer believe they will find these things in churches. They might be right, but I think they are wrong. Either way, people in our neighborhood are looking less and less to the church to meet these longings. So, if we as the church think that the best way to reach these peoples is get people to come to our building for religious services or programs, we are probably going to be disappointed. Things just aren't working like that anymore. But the good news is that Jesus has ripened the culture for the church to once again go to the unchurched in our workplaces, in our schools, and in our neighborhoods. If the culture won't come to our church buildings, then we can go to them and give them the very things for which they are longing. That's actually how Jesus had always designed for us to operate. As we follow Jesus, people will experience God's grace and truth in real life. Every Sunday, Christians gather and worship around the word and sacrament, right? Then we're sent out to join Jesus as he carries out his redemptive mission in our communities the rest of the week. This is what we mean by living missionally. Our lives are marked by his mission. We start watching with mission eyes. We start listening with mission ears. We start responding to the people around us. This is the rhythm of God's people. Gather to worship, to be strengthened and renewed by his word and sacraments, and then scattered out into the community, the field, to practice the grace and love and truth that we have been filled with. Coming to church on Sunday and being the church on Monday through Saturday. And this is all the more important now that the river has moved. Join us again to learn that being a missionary in our own community is a lot simpler than it looks.